Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Planet Safe on the Internet. I am Bill Folks. I am a Partner Experience Manager with GREENPATH Financial Wellness. I have been with GREENPATH since 2008, and I started out as a financial wellness expert before joining the Partner Experience team in 2015. I now work directly with our credit union partners, and I am joined today by my co-host, GREENPATH's Director of Information Security, Mr. Leo Hopper.
Hey, Bill. Hey, everyone. This is Leo Hopper. I'm the Director of Information Security for GREENPATH. I've been with GREENPATH for about 5 years now. I appreciate all of you taking an interest in your security on the internet. It's really encouraging. Just a little bit more about myself. I started out in the military many years ago, then transitioned into IT, and then transitioned into specifically into information security. And I've been in that field for about 10 years now. So looking forward to the helpful information that we can share with you guys, and hopefully keeps you safer on the internet.
Thanks, Leo. So as we get started, before we get started, just a little bit about who GREENPATH is for those of you who may be new. Maybe this is your first GREENPATH webinar you're attending. GREENPATH, we are a nonprofit HUD-approved housing and financial credit counseling agency. We started in 1961 as the budgeting service for the Michigan Credit Union League. We grew from there to become a regional consumer credit counseling service, and we kept growing. Now we provide financial counseling in all 50 states over the phone and face-to-face counseling in 40 locations in over 20 states. We are approved to provide HUD counseling, both pre-purchase and delinquency counseling. We provide credit report reviews and debt management services. So now that we've discussed that, let's actually get into the meat of what we're came here to talk about today, and that is identity theft. The issue of identity theft has become so prevalent in recent years that the federal government has made identity theft a federal crime, punishable by imprisonment by up to 2 years for general identity theft and up to 5 years for terrorism-based identity theft crimes. Today, we're going to briefly discover what identity theft is, including how it occurs, how to use your information, how to protect yourself, and what you do to them. But our primary focus today is going to be on how to protect yourself on the internet. So let's get started by talking about what identity theft is. Basically, identity theft is the crime of using another person's personal identification, credit history, or other identifying characteristics in order to make purchases or borrow money without that person's permission. Sometimes identity thieves will even sell personal information that they have stolen. And it's real easy for us to assume that we're never going to be a victim of identity theft because a lot of us don't know people who've ever been victims of identity theft. But the truth is 19 people become victims of ID theft each minute. And these victims include everyone, including children, teens, and adults. There are 4 types of identity theft. And those 4 types of identity theft are personal betrayal, and this occurs when someone steals your data. It is normally someone you know, such as a friend, a relative, or coworkers, but it could also be a stranger. Document loss. This occurs when you lose your wallet or your checkbook or credit cards or your mail or trash is stolen. Business leaks. This occurs when your personal files are stolen and are exploited from a place where you conduct a business. And the one that we're going to be focusing on today, computer crimes. This occurs when your data is stolen during your online activities. And today we're going to arm you with tools to fend off identity theft, as well as resources and steps to take if you become a victim of identity theft. So first, let's talk about why online activity is targeted. And that's because it's an easy attack vector, and bad guys can target you from just about anywhere. This past summer, the FBI released an alert about a recent increase in online shopping that directed victims to fraudulent websites via ads on social media platforms and popular online search engines. And so, Leo, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. You know, what we're seeing is there's always a risk of fraudulent websites popping up, but because of today's current environment and the fact that, you know, a lot of us are staying home and we're kind of locked down, there's an increase in online activity, and attackers are using this to their advantage to try to dupe people or attack people and take advantage of their information. And what they do is they take advantage of the inherent trust that people have for for friends, for people on social media, and information that they find through search engines. And so what they're doing is that they're based upon searches within search engines, or based upon Facebook friends and other posts. They're putting up fraudulent websites that can capture and take advantage of your personal information.
Great. And can you talk a little bit with us about what TLS is and risks of sharing at sites shopping without it? I saw that acronym, not quite sure what it means.
Yeah, so it basically TLS is an acronym for the secure protocol that's used on secure websites, sites that you would make some sort of payment. So you're using credit card, or using some other form of payment. It's collecting information that's sensitive that you want to be protected. This is one of the things that you want to look for. One, you want to look for reputable sites, but two, you want to look for, got this little image here, that lock that you can see in the upper left corner of your browser bar, the type where you type in your addresses that you're going to. That green lock indicates that it's secure. You'll also see the browsers have improved in today's age, in that they'll warn you if a site's not secure, or if there's something suspicious about it. They'll give you a red X or some kind of red text telling you it's not a secure site. So you want to make sure that any site that you go to, that you're either putting in sensitive information or you're making payments, that at a minimal it has that type of information.
Thanks, Leo. And so once identity thieves steal your identity, some of the things they can do include applying for credit in your name, withdrawing funds from your account, using your health insurance, obtaining medical care, using your social security number to steal your tax refund, and selling information on the dark web to other criminals. Leo, what can we do to protect ourselves from those type of things?
Well, there's several things that we can do to protect ourselves. First and foremost, you want to use reputable vendors. You want to go to reputable websites. We all are familiar with Amazon. We're all familiar with eBay, Walmart, Costco. Any of the big name vendors that you recognize. Etsy, which is a site that people are probably frequenting this time of the year. So you want to stick with those. You want to make sure, again, going back to that TLS, that you're only putting sensitive information. This would be payment information. This would be address information. Anything of yours that's sensitive, you're only entering that as encrypted sites. And that goes back to the TLS that we mentioned earlier, looking out for that little lock. You want to be cautious of really good deals, either really good deals posted on Facebook or any social media, or any really good deals sent to you via email, because that, as the old adage goes, if it's too good to be true, it probably isn't. Make sure that you're using credit cards for any online transactions, because Visa, MasterCard, American Express, any of the major credit cards have built-in protection mechanisms for those to protect you. If you're shopping using your mobile device, which that's on a major increase this year, people buying stuff directly from their phone as opposed to using a computer. You want to be cognizant or recognize what your settings are for the applications that you're using. Privacy applications, how much information does it collect? What information does it save? You want to check those things out. You want to be diligent about regularly checking your bank and credit card statements. You should be doing that as a normal practice anyway, but now, especially with the increase in e-commerce transactions, looking for any strange entries, because the sooner you report those to your bank or your credit card agency, the more likely that you will be protected in case anything bad happens. Any sites or applications that you use, you want to make sure that you check the privacy policies for those sites. What information of yours are they collecting, and what information are yours that they share? We see these pop-ups, and we normally, and it's a really long read, and then we just by default click accept. it protects you to take a little time and actually read that privacy policy to see what they collect and to see who they share it with. And if you don't agree with it, then don't do business or share your information with that organization. You want to keep your mobile devices and computers updated. If you have a way to turn on automatic updates, do that. That way you don't have to think about it. You don't have to remember it. It just automatically happens, and that will keep you safer. Make sure that you keep those devices up to date.
All right, thanks, Leo. So, and we see how important it is to stay safe while shopping at home. But what about when we're away from home? What are things we could do to stay safe on the internet when we're out and about and using our devices, Leo?
Yeah, it's still some of the same stuff, because kind of back to using that mobile device that we're talking about, because you may be using that home or you may be using it when you're traveling. It's just be cognizant of what that device is collecting, and your standard mobile devices, your iPhones, your Androids, your Google phones, your Windows phones, all of them now with an approved application, that application will tell you either in the pop-up or if you go look at the settings for that application, what information it's collecting. So you want to control your own information, if you will. So if an application is collecting your location data, ask yourself, do I really want to share this with that application and potentially that application's third-party relationships? So it's kind of that convenience versus risk factor. Do you like getting a pop-up from an application like a Starbucks app saying, "Hey, you're near a Starbucks. You should go get that, vanilla latte that you're thinking about." Or do you want to, are you are you concerned about your privacy and you don't want that information to be shared? So that'll determine, do you allow that application to track your GPS or your location, or do you not allow it? Do you allow it to track it only when you're using the application? The choice is up to you. And it's kind of that balancing the convenience versus the risk and how much information that you want to share with these particular applications or software vendors.
Thanks, Bill. So now that we see how important it is to stay safe while you're out and about, can you spell out to us what some of the risks are that involved when you're shopping online away from home? Specifically, what are some of those risks?
Yeah, sure. It goes back to like the first piece that we talked about is, actually the bottom of the list here is the location data. Do you want these applications knowing where you're at all times? Do you just want them to know where you're at when you're using their application, or do you not want them to track you at all? And that's where the information that may be shared with the third parties. Some of these applications may request access to your contacts and your calendars and your call logs because they want to customize their presentation of their content based upon that. So that could be a good use for it. But then some of them can be a little bit shadier in the reason why they collect the information. So they collect the contact information because they want to reach out to your contacts and try to push the application onto them. And you also have to be careful about, again, it's that convenience versus risk. Do you want the convenience of them having all of your information so they can more tailor their content to you, and put at risk the fact that if that organization is exposed or is breached, then your information is most likely going to be breached. So again, it's just thinking, how important is your privacy and where do you put that balance with the convenience factor of using these applications? And it goes back to, again, the what can we do to protect ourselves? Like the biggest thing I think you can do to protect yourself is just be cognizant of what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're sharing with organizations. Control your own data. You control your own risk and your own perspective about that information. And again, just reiterating, some of the things that you can do to protect yourself. Shop it only at those sites that you're familiar with. If it's a site that you're not familiar with, you can do a little bit of Google due diligence or reaching out to to contacts and looking for reviews of the sites, getting recommendations. If you go and you look up this site on, the Better Business Bureau website, or you look it up on Yelp and they don't get really good reviews, or you've got some complaints about people's information, think about that. Install only vendor approved apps. So you should only be installing apps on your iPhone, for example, that come from the iPhone from the Apple Store. For your Android device, from the Google Play Store. Because all of these applications that end up on the site go through at least some form of due diligence checking by, Apple and by Google to see if there are any obvious security risk in there. And once again, I just can't stress this enough. Just be savvy and cognizant about the applications you use and what information it is that they collect.
Bill, you're on mute. We can't hear you if you want to unmute yourself there if you're talking.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. I was actually thanking Leo for sharing with us the fact that that it's important to vet any organizations or any companies that we're not familiar with, because a lot of times we do want to make sure that we're using and taking advantage of local companies, especially in these harsh economic times. But even if you want to patronize local organizations, you want to make sure that you're vetting them and that they are legitimate.
Yeah, and some of those to kind of go with that, you want to shop local, support local is sometimes they don't have the resources. So it's not that there's necessarily bad intent in mind, but sometimes they don't have the resources to set up these secure sites and whatnot that some of the larger organizations. So if you do have a local vendor that you like to shop and you notice something that concerns you, then I would bring it to their attention, because I would assume that they want to secure their information just as well as you want to secure yours. So we could talk about kind of pivoting, like, this is a shopping time of the year. So what things can we do? We've talked about a few things to protect ourselves, but what are some additional things that we can do? Again, going back to that application that you're using, reviewing the permissions of what that application can do. What does it have access to your contacts? Does it have access to your, your phone numbers, your calendar, your call log? Does it have access to your location? Only share what it is that you think is necessary to use that application and what you're comfortable with. Not only do you want to keep your devices updated, but you want to keep the application software updated. And you have that ability, for example, on an iPhone to update your app, to set it up so it does it automatically, or you'll get a notification. You want to keep that updated not only to keep yourself secure, but also to make sure that you're using the latest and greatest version of that particular app. If you've got some applications that you're no longer using, delete those apps. One, that'll give you some space on your phone, but the other is that potentially you're removing a security risk in the event that it's an older application that hasn't been patched in a while. You want to be cautious with social network applications. You want to be cautious of what you're sharing. You want to be cognizant of what's being shared, and you want to be cautious of what you pull from there. This goes back to the shopping sites. If it sounds like a deal that's too good to be true, be careful with that. You want to limit your Wi-Fi activities. And by that, you want to be careful of if you've got a mobile device and you just allow it to connect to any Wi-Fi access point that's out there, I would suggest that you avoid any access points that don't require some type of login, because any access points that don't require any type of login are really susceptible to being compromised by bad guys who then could potentially capture your information. So if you do have to use a Wi-Fi access point that doesn't require some sort of password, even if it's like a shared password within a coffee shop, you probably want to avoid the more sensitive things like accessing your bank account, doing actual shopping where you're putting in credit card information. You want to think about where you charge your device. One of the attack vectors that bad guys can use are these USB plugins that you may see at airports and various coffee shops, where you can, instead of using your brick or your power supply that comes with your phone or that you purchased from a third party, you just plug the USB connection directly into that USB port in the wall. Those can actually be broken into and set up so that they collect your information. So you want to make sure that if you're using those in any public location, that you trust that public location, you trust the vendors who own that location, or just wait until you have an actual power brick that that you can trust, and stick with it. Be careful of where you put your device. I mean, our lives exist on these devices now. So you want to, when you're shopping, just like you're checking where you put your packages and making sure that you've got all of your stuff, check for that phone, make sure it's in your pocket, make sure it's in your purse. Protecting that device in the event that it is stolen, so you want to have a good PIN on that device. You want to have a password, or you want to have your biometric, where it either does a fingerprint scan or it does your facial recognition. You want to have that turned on just in case your phone is stolen or lost. Then someone can't compromise your data because there's some security built into it.
Awesome, Leo. So, and next, let's pivot and talk about using the proper use of passwords while we are using our devices to protect them.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to bring up, because this is one of those things, and probably one of the things where we can contribute the greatest to helping keep our information secure, other than being cognizant of the places that we share our information, and that's our passwords. First and foremost, you want to mix it up. You don't want to use the same password across every account, because the dangers of using the same password across every account is, let's say you have you're a needlepoint hobbyist and you're part of this discussion group that's on this website, and that website gets hacked and the information is compromised. And you just happen to use the same password for that site that you do your Bank of America site. Well, that site's been compromised, and now the bad guy has your email and your password. And what's the first thing he's going to do? He's going to start looking at the various banking sites to see if you have a login for those various banking sites. And if he's able to get access, he's going to compromise your information, and it's going to be a really bad thing. So by using different passwords for each account, it keeps you from being compromised if something like that. So if one of your accounts gets hacked or gets compromised, then the attacker can't use those same credentials to go towards your more sensitive information. The challenge with that is, like, wait a minute, Leo, a different password for every account. I've got like 20 things I've got to log into. Well, there's a few ways that you can deal with that. One, you could try using what's called a password manager, or password vault. We can talk a little bit about that. The suggestions for those a little later on, but you can use that to manage your password. There's various other ways that you can do it, and we'll talk about that in the next piece. And not only do you want to think about that on your computer, but you want to think about that on your phone as well. Both of these devices, using different passwords for different accounts puts you in a much better place. And you want to avoid thinking of passwords, and start thinking of passphrases. And a passphrase is like this example here. Now is the time for pumpkins 1999. And it's taking a phrase, or it's taking a combination of multiple words, something that you can more easily remember than kind of this leet hacker speak, where you try to change a character for a number. So instead of an E, you have a 3, and then you have a hard time remembering, did I substitute or did I not substitute? Just come up with a passphrase. Like I said, a combination of words that aren't related to each other, or say some pithy statement, or perhaps it's a lyric from a song that you like, or a Bible verse, or a quote from a poem. Things that are easier to remember, for you to remember, but not obviously so obvious that, like if you've got a tattoo or a phrase that you put on your Facebook page, you probably don't want to use that as your password, because people are probably going to guess at the first thing. But something that's longer and easier to remember, but much more difficult for the bad guys to hack.
And I really like the idea of adding something to it that you mentioned. You and I did a run through of this last week, and I love that idea so much. I actually incorporated that with an account I opened up later that weekend. So that one is one of those things is real simple and easy, but it makes it easier to customize them. We mentioned looking at the password vaults. Can we talk about those for a little bit?
Yeah, so the way a password vault works is, and people sometimes they get a little bit nervous, like, wait a minute, I'm gonna put all my passwords in one place. I thought we weren't supposed to do that. But in the case of password vault, first you want to do your due diligence to read the reviews on those, both from a usability and from a security perspective. But realize the way that they work is that they're an encrypted database, basically, that you store all of your passwords in. And then you have one, we'll call it gnarly, monstrous password that's used to unlock this password vault. And so you just essentially you could get to the point where you just need to remember this one password and all of your other passwords, because some of these vaults, the way they work is they'll automatically populate a website or an application with your password if you're tied into it. So for example, if you're using Password Vault and you go to Amazon.com, if you've got your browser plugged into this password, it will automatically put your password into that browser page and log you in, so you don't have to type anything in. Some of these will store your passwords in a local database. Some of these will store these up in the cloud. Again, the important thing to remember here is you have a master password and you need to remember that password, because most of them, if you forget that password, your passwords are all going to be locked up and there's not going to be a way to get in there. So in that case, that might be something I'd advise writing down someplace in case you can't easily remember it, and putting it away securely in case you need to get to these. But here's 3 vendors right here: Dashlane, 1Password, LastPass. There's various others. You could look at these, check these out, see if they offer what it is that you need, or just Google Password Vault or Password Manager, and you'll come up with various other applications that you could use. And I see right here that somebody popped up with a question about, is it okay to store passwords in iPhone under passwords? Is this safe? Yes, the iPhone has a really good password manager built into it. So it is secure. I would still recommend going more towards the Password Vault. That way you can manage all of your passwords. The iPhone solutions in particular is good. What I might avoid, though, is saving that in your browser, because various browsers on computers at certain points in times have had risk related to storing that password and saving it in the browser. In those cases, you're still better off putting it into a password vault. And one other thing we would talk about while we're kind of on the password vault stuff is that technically, as much as we've heard it time and time again not to write your passwords down, technically it's okay to write your passwords down. Just don't write them on a sticky note and put them on your computer monitor at work. Do not do that, especially at GREENPATH, because we may have a few words. But in all seriousness, it's fine to write it down on a piece of paper or in a notebook or something and keep it securely at your home. The only thing I'd advise against is don't keep it sitting out if you're at home and you've got tweens or teenagers, because inevitably they'll find it and they'll get access to your stuff. But there's nothing wrong with writing it down as long as you keep it secure. But I still recommend looking at password managers and password vaults.
That is awesome. Thank you, Leo. And so more ways to be vigilant are coming up on your screen here. And of course, Leo, can you talk about these things here?
Yeah, it still goes back to, if you're trust your instinct at times. If a website or a link seems suspicious, then there's a good chance that it is that there is something there. If a deal seems too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. So, want to be careful of that. Somebody calls you up on the phone and is asking some personal information, and they don't know who, and you don't know who that person is, or you're not expecting that phone call. Don't share your information out via that person. Or if it's somebody, let's say, for example, calls from your bank or representing themselves to call from your bank, and they say, hey, we need this information, or they say they're from the IRS and they say, we need this information, flip it around the other way and say, well, let me call you back, and then look up the actual number for, let's say it's Bank of America. Look up the actual number for your local IRS representative. Call and say, hey, did you really, need to contact me? Be careful of things that come in through your email. any emails that you get that you are not aware of, that, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not expecting this email, or they have attachments in there that you're not expecting, that somebody said, I'm going to send you this thing, delete those. If it's legitimate, you'll get another one. But in most cases, trust your first instinct. If something just doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Protecting your own physical documents. If you've got bank statements, insurance, medical, any of that type of stuff on your in your home location, don't just throw it in the trash. Get a shredder, a good crosscut shredder, and shred those. And limiting your exposure, by where you share the information and what information is that you share.
Awesome, Leon. I can't stress enough not to ever give your personal information out to someone who calls you. No legitimate organization, no bank, no government agency, no one is actually going to call you up on the phone and ask you for your personal information. Generally, if there's an issue, like I got a letter from my bank in the middle of the other day regarding my one of my debit cards. They sent me a letter, gave me the phone number I need to call or the website to go to. They're not going to call you over something like that. If it's something legitimate, they're going to put it in writing. So thanks for sharing that, Leo. And with all that great information, we can't forget that a key part of staying safe is reviewing your credit report on a regular basis. The best ways to get your credit report is at annualcreditreport.com. This is the website that was set up as a result of the Fair Credit Reporting Act that states you are entitled to a free copy of your credit report from each of the 3 credit bureaus every 12 months. Also, there is a form you can use if you prefer to request your credit report by mail or by any of the nationwide consumer credit reporting agencies. This form can be found online at annualcreditreport.com. We're going to put that web address in the chat for you, or you can call at 877-332-8228 to receive it. Of course, you're all going to receive copies of the slides for this as well, so you'll have that information in the slides as well. If you anticipate you need to borrow money, we suggest that you look at your credit report at least 6 months prior so that if there are any errors, you have time to correct those errors. When you go to annualcreditreport.com, your screen is going to look similar to this. So please note that that only the reports are free. If you want to get your credit score, you're going to have to pay for it, and it's usually $6 to $8 depending on the credit bureau. Lenders are only required to provide the credit score if they use that score to make an adverse decision on your application for credit. This includes being denied for a loan or credit card approved at an interest rate higher than the best rate being offered. Obviously, we don't recommend applying for something knowing that you're going to get denied just to get your free credit score, because doing that is actually going to hurt your credit score. When you go to annualcreditreport.com, they're going to ask you several security questions or challenge questions. One that I encountered when I applied for one is they asked me what the name of the bank was that I took out my mortgage in the year 2000. I did not buy my home in the year 2000, so my home in the year 2000. So I put that as not applicable. So they might even ask you questions that aren't even true, just once again to challenge you. So keep in mind, these questions are meant to ensure that you are who you say you are. My name is Bill Folks. It's not a very common name, but there are other Bill Folkses out there. So at the very least, they want to make sure they're dealing with the right Bill Folks. You do have the option of getting all 3 reports at the same time. If you've never seen your reports, this might be a good idea. However, another idea is to stagger those reports where you're getting them every 4 months. For example, you can get your Experian report in May, the Equifax report in September, and maybe the TransUnion report in January. Then you'd be able to get them Experian again in May. Doing this allows you to review all 3 of your credit reports throughout the year instead of at once, and it may alert you to identity theft faster. How do you know if you've become a victim of identity theft? Well, one way is you're going to have unexplained charges on your credit card statement. Or you may have an absence of bills in the mail. If you're not getting those bills in the mail, that could also be an indication that you are a victim of identity theft. If you've gotten cards that you didn't order, or cards that you don't remember ordering, you want to check that out, because it could be that someone has opened up an account in your name. Same thing if you've been denied credit for no reason, if there are inaccuracies on your credit report, if you're getting collection calls for accounts that you don't recognize. And to be sure, none of these things are surefire indications that you were a victim of identity theft. There could be an innocent explanation of it. but it's not the type of thing you want to ignore. You don't want to assume that it's innocent. You definitely want to check up and follow up on anything like that if it happens. If you do discover that you have been, in fact, the victim of identity theft, you have the right to create an FTC identity theft report. The FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, and you can do that at identitytheft.gov. And that FTC identity theft report helps you prove to businesses that someone stole your identity, and it makes it easier to correct problems caused by identity theft. You can create your FTC identity theft report by filing a report with the FTC. And what this does is it acts as a declaration of your innocence. It helps start the investigation. A police report also serves as a sworn statement that you were not responsible for any crimes. And oftentimes it's going to be really important that you do get a police report because a lot of times, even though your local police department may not be able to do a whole about the identity theft unless you have proof of who it is and we're able to get evidence of them actually doing it. But a lot of times that police report goes hand in hand in showing that you're serious and that you've taken the correct steps to report the identity theft. And a lot of times agencies such as the FTC or even your creditors may want to see a copy of the police report. You have the right to stop creditors and debt collectors from reporting fraudulent accounts. So after you've given them a copy of a valid FTC identity theft report, they may not report fraudulent accounts to the credit reporting agencies. So get copies of documents related to the theft of your identity, things such as transaction records or applications for new accounts. Write to the company that has the document and include a copy of your FTC identity theft report. You can also tell the company to give the documents to a specific law enforcement agency if it's being investigated that way. In most cases, debt collectors must stop contacting you after you send them a letter telling them to do so. Be sure to get written information from debt collectors about any debt, including the name of the creditor and the amount you supposedly owe. If a debt collector contacts you about a debt, request that information in writing. You also have the right to place a one-year hold on your one-year fraud alert on your credit report. So be sure to contact the credit reporting bureaus. The fraud alert tells creditors that they must take reasonable steps to verify who is applying for credit in your name. Once again, even if you have a name that's not very common like mine, there could be other people out there with that name. So the creditors have to take reasonable steps to make sure that you are who you say you are. Once you place that one-year fraud alert, you're entitled to a free copy of your credit report at that time, and you'll get a confirmation letter from each credit bureau with instructions on how to get your free copy of your credit report. You can also place a 7-year extended fraud alert on your credit report. To do this, you send a copy of your FTC identity theft report to each credit bureau. The extended fraud alert means that potential creditors must contact you before they issue credit in your name. And in your letter, you be sure to give the best way for a creditor to reach you. Each credit bureau will send you a letter confirming that they place an extended fraud alert on your file, and that letter will also include instructions on how to get the free copy of your credit report. And you can also get get the bureaus to remove fraudulent information from your credit report. And this is called blocking. And to do that, you have to send a copy of the FTC identity theft report. Once again, that's why it's so important. And proof of your identity and a letter stating which information is fraudulent. Then the credit bureau must tell the relevant creditor that someone stole your identity, and creditors cannot turn fraudulent debt over to debt collectors. You want to be sure to dispute any fraudulent or inaccurate information on your credit report. And a lot of times, most of us have inaccurate things on our credit report from time to time. In fact, most of us will probably wind up with something inaccurate that's not necessarily fraud on our credit reports. And to do this, you're going to do it in writing at the credit bureau. Generally, when you pull your credit report online, there are drop-down boxes with menus that give you options to either report something or dispute it. And the credit bureau must investigate and amend your report if it turns out you are correct. You have the right to place a freeze on your credit report. And a credit freeze, which is also called a security freeze, makes it less likely that identity theft can open a new account in your name. When you do that, it basically locks your account. And in order for anyone to access it, even you to access it, you have to notify the credit bureau ahead of time and request that it be unfrozen. And you have to be careful because this can be a roadblock if you're planning to make a purchase and you forget to make that, remove that freeze beforehand. So if you're going to buy a car or something and you're trying to take out a car loan, that could be an issue if you forget to have that removed. And you also want to make sure you contact the local authorities. The FTC recommends that you report to local authorities in these cases. If you know the identity thief, or you have other information that could aid in a police report, police investigation. On identity theft, a thief used your name with an account in the police, which actually happened to me about 20 years ago. Someone got a ticket and gave my name, never found out who it was, but I did get out of the ticket because I was able to prove that I wasn't where that ticket was issued. For this instance, it might be a traffic stop like the one I got, or a creditor or debt collector or other affected party insists that you produce a police report. Now, those are the situations where the FTC recommends. Once again, we recommend anytime that you have been a victim of identity theft and you confirm it, you want to go ahead and make a police report and get a copy of the police report. Ideally, at the very least, get a copy of the police report where you live. And if it's possible to file one in the jurisdiction where the action took place at, where the crime took place at, then do that. Now, if it's somewhere on the other side of the country, that may not be possible, but if it's a local one, then yes, by all means, make sure you do that. And finally, you want to make copies of any documents, including your identity theft complaint, and you'll need these to resolve any disputes with companies where the identity theft thief you. So, as we wrap up and as we do a quick review, you want to make sure that you know and are familiar with the laws that protect you. Now, obviously, none of us are lawyers. Very few of us are. Some of you might be. I'm not a lawyer, but it's never a bad idea to be familiar with the laws that's going to protect you. And it's very important that you do that so you're not taken advantage of. It's also important to stay up to date with new or changes to laws, to existing laws regarding identity theft. The Fair, Accurate, and Credit Transactions Act is one of those laws. It gives every consumer the right to obtain a free copy of their credit report from each of the 3 credit bureaus once a year. The Identity Theft Assumption Deterrence Act makes identity theft a federal crime. The Identity Theft Penalty Enhancement Act provides greater penalties for identity thieves, and we're going to share this stuff out in the after the webinar in the email I send. Fair Credit Reporting Act gives consumers many rights when dealing with billing errors. Electronic Transfer Act applies many of the rights under the Fair Credit Reporting of the Act to electronic fund transfer accounts. Fair Credit Reporting Act governs credit reporting agencies, and the most familiar with these being the credit bureaus. Also be aware of current scams or other scams out there. You can do that at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website. And you can check them out at ftc.gov. And once again, we're going to be sharing all of this stuff with in the email with the links that you're going to be getting in a day or so. Well, I really hope this webinar has been helpful. Please remember to complete the survey at the end of the session. It should open automatically in your browser once you close it. We would truly appreciate it if you could fill out that survey. Of course, you're welcome to contact GreenPath for a free and confidential phone assessment with one of our financial wellness experts to review your credit report or your financial situation, and you can receive tips tailored for your own situation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording, but we're going to stay in the room here for a little bit. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Leo, did you want to sign off?
No, I just noticed that there were a couple of questions. Did you want to respond to those questions, or you want to continue, or how did you?
Let's go ahead and respond to those questions after we stop the recording, but I do want to thank everyone for joining us. And you know what, in fact, let's leave the recording on so we can have these responses in the recording. How's that?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I saw a couple there. Go ahead, Jesse. Did you have something?
I was just going to read the questions for you. The first one that I had
cool.
is, some institutions will ask on the phone for the 4 digits of your social security number to verify identity. What are your comments on this practice?
Yeah, so it's a good, it's a bit of a challenge because they need to identify you and have something that's unique to you. And I understand there's probably some concern about it, but doing the last four keeps you in safe enough of a place where they're not going to be able to compromise your social security number, and also keeps you in a safe place because they're verifying your identity. So making sure that someone else is not trying to pretend to be you. So I think it's a good, solid practice.
If I could add to
Leo,
that, I would add that, don't be afraid to ask, why do you need that? If they legitimately need it, they shouldn't have any problem explaining to you why they need it. As a counselor, we pull credit reports all the time, and we ask social security numbers for various reasons. People always ask me. I was always proud of people when they say, why do you need that? Ask, why do they need that? If they need it, they should be able to tell you why they need it.
Yeah, excellent. Very good point, Bill. I completely agree.
And then the next question is more of a little bit of a phrase or maybe some additional advice. They chatted in, we have set up a debit card with our bank that we fund for making purchases on different websites. This may limit the amount that can be taken from our account or keeps our credit cards from being compromised. Any additional thoughts there?
Yes. Yeah, so it kind of depends on what the set, because I guess I need to understand the arrangement and how it was set up and everything. Where you have to be careful is, so debit cards that are credit cards, so they have a Visa, MasterCard, so it's a debit type card that you can use as a Visa card, have the inherent built-in protection mechanisms of a credit card. So when you use it online, it's using it like it's a credit card. So you're protected there. You don't want to get compromised, but you're protected. Versus a bank card, or a debit card, you want to be certain that you know what your financial institution's rules are as far as utilizing a debit card in its debit card format. So that may be one of the reasons why you set this up in making purchases, because the upside of a credit card is if they charge $2,000 on it, you don't lose anything. If they take $2,000 out of your bank account, you lose $2,000, and then you have to work with your bank, so, to get that set up. But I think I probably suggest to do what sounds like you've done, which is work with your bank and what they recommend based upon their terms of service as far as using debit cards.
Perfect. Thank you, Leo. The next question we have is, what about autosave for forms on a personal computer? While this is convenient, is it safe?
So I would veer away from autosave, and there's actually various security standards depending upon the type of website where websites aren't supposed to do autosave. So things like passwords or other sensitive type information. You have to be careful with those, because right now browsers are in a pretty good place, but there have been times before when an attacker could compromise that saved information because of the way that a browser saves it during an autosave session. Now if it's something like a mobile phone app and it's got some sort of multi-factor type authentication, and you're saving you want to say, hey, recognize me from this point forward, then that's acceptable. I'd be careful with putting information in a field and then auto saving that information, especially in a browser on your computer, because potentially that could compromise you or put you in a risky position.
Thank you, Leo. Next question we had is, I keep my location off. Can they still track me?
As long as it's not one of these third-party apps that you kind of have to side load, as long as it's something from the Apple Store or something from the Google Play Store or something from one of the approved vendor stores for your particular mobile device, no, you're in a good spot. And I like your attitude. I like to keep my location turned off as well, unless it's something that I specifically need location tracking turned on. I think that's it's a good question and a good practice, I believe.
That is a good question. I've wondered that myself. It never occurred to me. And I have access to Leo all the time. It never occurred to me to ask you that. I'm glad that person asked that question.
Yeah. And there's always, that's the good thing about putting them in the store, is that's one of the things that the store approval process will look for, is like, hey, can settings change in here without the user actively going through and changing those settings?
Thank you. And another thing, kind of to follow up on that same type of question, you mentioned pop-ups, like you mentioned like Starbucks saying, I'm close by now, go ahead and get this. How does that work? How do they know that? And how could I prevent that pop-up type of thing from happening?
So typically it'd be something, and I don't know, I mentioned Starbucks. It's been so long since I've used the Starbucks app. I don't know if it actually has that that capability. So forgive me, Starbucks, if you're on here listening. Um, anyway, it's if it has your location, it kind of goes back to one of these options. If it has your location tracking turned on, and basically what it does is it cross-references where you are at in reference to where the closest vendor or their location is. Then at that point in time, they go, "Oh, you're in the area. Hey, pop up. We'd recommend that you go check this out." So basically, they're just cross-referencing their known location with your tracked location and determining whether they should target you with information. But again, that goes back to you. Do you want them to track you all the time? Do you want them to track you only when the app is open, or do you want them to never track you? And you got to balance that against the convenience factor of what the application does.
Thank you. Next question is, how do I know what applications are running? I assume on the phone. What are they accessing? How do I find out what they're accessing?
So that's kind of a challenging one. It's dependent upon your phone, but usually there's something within your application settings where you can look for usage, and then from within that usage, you can see what applications are running at that point in time. And then you can look at each application. So I'll use iPhone as an example. If you go into your settings, and you scroll down towards the bottom, there it has all of your applications listed. And if you highlight one of those applications, it'll tell you, so for example, I'm looking at an application on my phone now and it has three settings: location, Siri and search, or cellular data. So those three options, I can choose how or what it can do with my location. I can choose whether I use Siri to search for information, and I can choose whether it only uses Wi-Fi data or cellular data. So that's going to be dependent on your phone. And so I might advise like going to your phone. So if you have an iPhone, going to Apple's website. If you have an Android, maybe Googling, or if you have a Samsung, maybe Googling for that information and how you can check it. But there should be an area within your phone that shows you what applications are running, and then within your list of applications, it should tell you what it's accessing and what your current settings are for that application.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And last question I have so far, and please, if you have any additional questions, go ahead and chat them in. The one that I have right now is a little bit more of a phrase here. They say they don't have data service on their phone, so they need Wi-Fi while they are out to use their service. They have to get on the internet somehow. Any advice for them?
Yeah, so for them, it still goes along the lines of being cognizant, being careful of where it is that you're getting Wi-Fi access. So if you're just doing some general, web surfing and you're not accessing any sensitive site or any sites that you're concerned with, then, any Wi-Fi will probably work for you. But if you're using something that requires some type of login, so maybe one of your social media sites, your banking site, or if you're doing any shopping, I would avoid any access point. So, like thinking of like your local coffee shop, they usually have a chalkboard with like the Wi-Fi password up on it. Those have a certain level of security that don't exist if it doesn't require anything. You just choose that access point and you connect to it. You don't have to put any kind of password in it. Those can be extremely easy to attack, to collect your information. So you want to be careful with those, at least for doing your sensitive transactions. So like your banking, your shopping, logging into your social media, stick to just something that has some sort of password, whether it's shared and written on a chalkboard or they give it to you uniquely. You want to stick with those.
And then we have one more question came in. I think it's a follow-up to as far as keeping location status on. I think it was, what about Bluetooth? So keeping the Bluetooth and the location status on or off.
Yeah, so Bluetooth is an interesting animal because over the years it's had problems, and there have been certain exploits that require a little bit more technical expertise to take advantage of. But I'd say as long as you have a more current phone, so you've got a phone within the last 5, 6 years I would deem as current, and it still gets updates. So you're still able to update the phone, then you're probably in good shape for your Bluetooth. But, do you actually need it turned on? If you don't have headphones or anything that you need to connect to that Bluetooth, then I would turn Bluetooth off. If you need it, turn it on. But, make sure that your phone stays updated in case there's any type of exploits or weaknesses within Bluetooth that those can be patched. So, it's kind of that convenience versus risk factor. Do I need it? And if yeah, then turn it on and use it. If you don't need it, don't use it.
So it's probably a good idea to, only turn the Bluetooth on if you're actually going to be using it, because a lot of us, and myself included, get into the habit of, I have several wireless headphones that I use and earbuds,
Yep.
and I just leave my Bluetooth on all the time. So
Yep.
if I'm not actually using it, I should probably turn it off then, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those challenges, is kind of that convenience versus risk and cognizant of what's going on factor. But yeah, I say if you're not using it, turn it off, and then when you go to put your headphones in or whatever else you want to connect it to, turn it back on. That puts you in a better spot.
I've gotten into the habit of turning the Bluetooth off,
Yeah.
only because my one pair of headphones now connects to my computer, my personal phone, and my work phone. So I got to decide which one I'm using it with. So it's easier to keep them all turned off until I'm using the headphones with the one device.
Yep.
And that is all the questions that we have at the moment. If anybody does have any other questions, we have a few more minutes till the top of the hour. We can go ahead and take any more questions. Go ahead and chat those in.
Actually, one did come in that I'm going to grab, and it said, the source said, sorry if you mentioned this because I cut out for a while, but does freezing your credit with the 3 credit bureaus protect you? Yes, it does protect you. And basically when you're freezing that your credit with the credit bureaus, no one can access your credit report unless you unfreeze it ahead of time, including yourself. So even if you were to try to pull your credit report, or say if you were going to go and try to take out a car loan, you'd need to unfreeze your credit bureau, your credit report from the bureau before you do that. And there was actually one more question that came in that I think Leo should take. It says, I was on my work Wi-Fi and I tried to access my bank but couldn't get in. Then I got a message that the connection was not secure. Do you think someone could have gotten my information?
Well, it depends. Like at the point in time when you got kicked off, and are you using there's a lot of factors there. It's kind of hard for me to answer that question. Were you going to the website? Were you using the application? Did you type in your credentials after it said it wasn't secure? Most likely what it sounds like is that your bank. So if you're at a work site, because the way that some technical work sites can be set up is they do monitoring, and it's legitimate and necessary monitoring, but sometimes it can interfere with certain websites that you go to that may detect that monitoring as though it's an actual attack when it's not. So it may be the case that you're on your work site, they've got some security mechanisms in place, and the banking site said, wait a minute, there's something strange going on here. And so they gave you that warning that, it wasn't secure, and they ended the connection. Most likely that was because I know even at GreenPath, potentially that can happen because of the monitoring and security mechanisms that we have in place. So I probably wouldn't worry about it. But if you have a way, on your banking website to go see, where you logged in, when you logged in from, or any of that, then, maybe you want to check that out when you're not on the work connection to see if everything still works the way that you think it should work. When I see, and I'll because I think I saw this one pop up twice, so I'll do it real quick. The contactless credit cards, are these preferable to regular credit cards when shopping in a store? And I'm assuming that at contactless, I don't know if you're talking about the chip, or we're talking about like the iPhone kind of scan it, what they call NFC, which is near field communications type. From as a user perspective, those security mechanisms don't really affect you a whole lot. because at the end of the day, if your credit card is compromised, you just have the headaches of dealing with the credit card company, and they'll typically straighten everything out. That's meant more so to protect the credit card companies from some bad guy intercepting that information and being able to compromise that payment information. Because the way credit cards are set up, you're protected. You just have to deal with the aggravation. So they're good from a convenience factor, but from a security factor, I don't think they're any better or worse than normal credit cards.
All right. And it is exactly 2 o'clock. And thank you so much for joining us and lending your expertise, Leo. It just adds such an air of authenticity when we can have an internet security expert with us. We do want to thank all of you for joining us for our webinar today. Once again, we heard this, and I actually did record all these questions and answers, so you'll be able to view those questions and answers during the recording as well. And you will get a link to the webinar recording and the slides, hopefully tomorrow or by the end of the week at the latest. But once again, I want to thank you all for joining us. We'll hope to see you real soon at one of our GREENPATH Financial Wellness webinars, and you have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.